All right. Here we are with a BlabberMouths 101. This time, we are going to start our, what I like to call Phys Ed for Dummies series on the LGBT community. We're going to talk about what it's like to be a teacher that's representative of the LGBT community, and also what it's like to talk about in our class and also discuss with our coworkers. So before I get started, let's talk about the letters. Is it LGBT? Is it LGBTQIA? Where am I going wrong? Where am I going right? Why don't we start with our famous J-Lo, Judy LoBianco. And if you want to say where you teach real quick, in case anyone doesn't know who you are, they've been under a rock in the phys ed world for the past 10 years, doesn't know. Let them know.
Hello, United States of America. Judy LoBianco, Supervisor of Health, Phys Ed, and Nursing in the South Orange Maplewood School District. And, you know, LGBTQIA, 30 years ago, you didn't hear that. You heard lesbian and gay, but it is a long set of letters that only means that our community has gotten larger and we have enjoyed a breadth and depth of acceptance that is just phenomenal. I am so jealous of the youngsters that are going to school today that can feel that kind of freedom.
All right, so what does the QIA stand for? And why don't we bring that over to Stephanie Roth? I want to tell us a little bit about yourself and where's the QIA and how is that more inclusive than just LGBT?
Hey everyone, United States of America and beyond. My name is Stephanie Roth and I teach in Oakland, California. I'm at a K-8 independent school and this is my 11th year teaching physical education. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Steph. I'm excited to join you all. Well, queer, questioning, the Q stand for multiple things. I, intersex. The A, I actually am not sure.
Asexual.
Asexual. Okay. Yeah. All right. There you go. Thank you. And I think as far as inclusivity, I think the community is always thinking about trying to include everyone and seeing how I don't know what all the letters stand for all the time either, that they are continuing to grow and always trying to make sure everyone feels like they have a part in this particular identities. Yeah.
Nice. So Stephanie Sandino is joining with us. Great to see you. Can you tell us a little bit more about intersex? What is it? And why is that included in as well so people can get, because that's the one, I think we understand what asexual would be. I would imagine that LGBT is a little easier. What's going on with the intersex?
Well, my name is Stephanie Sandino. As Justin just mentioned, I am from Southern California. I teach at a middle school, 7th through 8th in Chino Hills. So big change, big new transition for me this year. As far as the intersex, that's more for inclusivity. It's more of the fluidity type deal. So we're dealing with, you know, people trying to figure out where they fall, where they range. And I think it's just a term to fit all of these categories, quote unquote, that people want to put themselves in or not put themselves in. So from what I understand, it's more an inclusive term that can include people that are still questioning where they lie. If it's, you know, queer, gay, lesbian, so they're kind of in this middle ground and they're trying to, you know, see what direction they want to go in, from my understanding.
All right, let's move on. So Ms. Sandino, first, can you talk a little bit?
Can I clarify, Justin?
Yes, please do. Please clarify.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. Intersex can also, just want to add to Steph's definition, intersex can also be people who were born with both chromosomes, male and female. Right. And so we don't fall into either category. And this is often, when they're born, they're often given a gender, assigned a gender. And often these folks have both. So a silenced identity and community that has not been. And if you've heard of the book Middlesex, that's a huge popular book that was written of a story of someone who was born intersex. So yeah.
All right, thank you. And if at any time I say something that's incorrect, whether politically or factually, please step in and correct me. Do not feel embarrassed at all, because I really don't know what I'm talking about over here. So let's start with number one. Are you a part of the LGBTQIA community? And if you are, how do you talk about that with your staff or the people around you? Is it something that just naturally occurs? Do people ask you? Or are you willing to share it? Do you feel a need to hide it? All these questions pop in my head. So who would like to go first on that one?
I'll go first. This is J-Lo. You can all call me J-Lo. We're all friends now. Yes, I am part of that community, our community. And what's interesting to me is, at the age I am, 20 years ago, you wouldn't think of even talking about any of that when you stepped into your school. It was extremely important. And I got to tell you, I started teaching in the late 80s. It was extremely important to keep it as far away from your classroom as possible, because you didn't know how people were going to react. And I started by saying, I envy this generation of kids, because we're so much more free and confident with who we are that we can talk about it. But I got to tell you, in my lifetime, I cannot believe how comfortable our students and our teachers are, having been a supervisor now. Back then, I was frightened. I was actually frightened. You're a teacher in a school. You're in a physical education setting. You've got the locker rooms right next door. You were afraid at every turn someone's going to accuse you of making kids gay, or being accused of being this bad thing called gay. And above all, back then, you were afraid of one thing, and that was being fired. And going from a place in my career, in my lifetime, where I started teaching feeling that way, and now where I'm in an incredible position to be able to help others, it's such a refreshing thing to see that over the decades. And I only wonder what's it going to look like in the future. So does it come up with colleagues? It comes up as often as anybody would talk about their own family. I speak about my wife like someone speaks about their husband. I bring her to school events, retirement dinners and Christmas parties, etc. And I talk very normally about my family life like anybody else would. But I tell you what, 25 years ago, no chance. So it's been interesting.
Nice, thank you. I love seeing the perspective there, because you actually had to deal with the fear, and now most of it's alleviated, although we might be going back to fear again. But let's not dwell on that. All right, Steph Sandino, why don't you talk a little bit about your experience, miss?
On the flip side, I think, is where I lie. Last 3 years, I was in a small community, in a small district, in a small rural town, where, it was my first real job as a new teacher. Of course, I don't have a family. I don't have a significant other. Yes, I am a part of this community, but I just didn't feel I was comfortable enough to come out to my colleagues. This was at a point in time where I'm starting brand new. I don't want to, thinking, kind of stirring the pot in a small town where everybody knows each other, and it could, possibly take one parent or one community member to say something or take action, whether it's through the school board or through administration at the district level. So I didn't feel comfortable enough to do that. It didn't come up in any way amongst my colleagues. So I never said anything. And up until now at my new district, it hasn't really come up at all. If I had if it came up, or if a question came up about, are you seeing anyone? Obviously, I'm not at this time, but if it came up, I would definitely feel a little bit more comfortable now in this new setting than I'm in right now with the new community.
All right. Stephanie Roth, want to talk about your experience here?
Yeah. And just to reiterate my perspective, just one, and I am a part of the community, and I identify as a queer white woman I'm married. I've been married for about 5 years, and we've been together for 12. And so since I started my teaching career, I've had a significant other. We have a 2-year-old now. And I think when I think back to my college days, so I also identify as it's important for people to know that kind of gender nonconforming. So when I show up somewhere, it is often assumed that I am a part of the LGBT community, that I'm not, I often, yeah, so that assumption is often made. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. And so when I was looking for a job, I was scared in the sense that I didn't know if I would find a boss or, a principal or a school that would support me and really honor, and because I knew that I wanted to be out. And I did have a family relative that told me that I would have to change my appearance a little, maybe grow out my hair, maybe dress a little different. And that was hard to hear. And that was right as I was finishing college. And so when I did come to the Bay Area, which was a little different than grad school in Tennessee, in Knoxville. So I went from Knoxville, Tennessee to the Bay Area. And so geographically, whoa. And there's a reason why we moved to the West Coast. I was quite pleasantly surprised when I came here, because I found people that were like, oh yeah, have your tattoos, that's fine, and be you. And my first principal, like, I was able to be out with my partner, with her, to all of my colleagues. I had colleagues who were also identified as gay or lesbian. That helped. That was huge. I talked about it a lot because that was important for me to be my authentic self at school. And then bringing a kid in the mix really helped me, because now I can show a picture to my kids of my family and sort of say, like, here's who I am. Here's what I go home to, after school gets out, and how is this, different? How is the structure different from your family, and how is it the same? And so I think it really helps for me, though, because I have colleagues who are allies. I have community members, families, parents who are also allies. So it's been a journey for me. I didn't used to come out on the first day of school for the first 7 years of teaching. Now I do it every year. Even though the kids already know, I show them who I am, because it's important for them to see that. That's sort of something that has come with time. So yeah, they think that's come with confidence and really knowing who I am. So, but I've been lucky to have the support of the administration, which is really important, to know that they have your backs.
Yeah, it is. And especially in ways where administration, if they don't like you, there's always a reason. They're not going to be stupid enough to come out and say, oh, we have a bias against you because of the way you look or the attraction you have. They're going to find some other way. And if you don't have tenure laws or rules, then it's all in void. Thank you, and have a good day. So let's go to the important part of all this, the conversations with students. So we talk so much about modeling, right? We say that we need people of color in the classrooms because they have to model that this is something you can attain, something you can do. And that goes the same for the LGBTQIA community, I would say, as well. When students see people who may not look like them or act like them in positions of authority or, just in everyday life, now it's something that A, they can interact with, and B, if they are in that community, now we could say, hey, I had a teacher who was part of the community, and it's natural to them. So, J-Lo, did you ever have that conversation come up in class? Because I know you've been out of the classroom for a little while. Has that come up in class? And how do you deal with that, being a part of the community and knowing that your view or vantage point is going to, A, have a bias in one way or another, and then is there going to be a backlash for the conversation that's coming up in your class?
Right. All the time. It came up all the time, particularly in health education. And here in New Jersey, we have a very progressive health education curriculum. We talk all about gender fluidity and LGBT. And even when I was in the classroom 10, 15 years ago, we talked about it. And, you know, standing up in front of the classroom and helping kids facilitate a conversation around this, of course they want to know, well, are you gay, Ms. Lobianco? And, you know, for reasons that you didn't want to have the whole conversation be about you, you would say, well, this is not really about me. This is about our discussion about searching your feelings about people who are different from you. And kids would say things that I have to tell you sometimes were extremely hurtful. Like they strove to understand, but there was some of them that they had a bias and they didn't understand. I mean, this is again 20 years ago, and I'm sure it happens in the classroom now, but I got to tell you, I took it real personal, and it's not like I didn't have young women coming to me saying, I'm struggling with my sexuality, and they came to me. And you had to advise them in ways that were safe and helpful, and these were kids that were in tears, and they didn't want to tell their parents. And as a teacher, you relive that entire experience from when you were in high school. It's just this vicious cycle, and a lot of that doesn't go away. We still have kids in our schools struggling like you've never believed, whether they're gay or lesbian or particularly transgender, which is a topic that's really loud and out front right now. And a teacher that is gay and lesbian has a huge responsibility to be able to bring kids to a place where they feel comfortable talking about these topics, particularly in health, where we're trying to get kids to make decisions on their own, make sure that they get valid information, and make sure that they don't just, you know, tolerate the gay community. I don't want to be tolerated. I want to be accepted as a member of society. So these are all super important things. It's just the way that this thing has evolved has been amazing. And yeah, it came up then and it comes up now. And there were times when I disclosed that I was gay back then because it saved kids' lives. You know, these were kids, you know, the statistics are out there. Our kids are killing themselves over this. I don't want to see that happen again.
Absolutely. Stephanie Roth, how's this affect your teaching when it goes in your classroom?
Yeah, like I said, when I first started teaching, I don't think it never came up. I didn't talk about it with kids at all, you know, at all. And then I think as time went on, and I also teach K to 5, you know, and that's also kindergarten through 5th grade developmentally. They're not thinking much outside themselves, so they're not exactly asking the questions as much. But I think, you know, there's a lot of assumptions there. And I remember there was some backlash at my first school where a parent came to the school because one of our teachers had talked about being gay to her and talked about her family because she had a son and a wife. And the one of the parents was really upset. And basically the principal said, you know, I completely support what our teacher did, and if you had a problem with it, I'm sorry. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, okay. Like, it was absolute reassurance for me that I knew I could be who I wanted and also be open with the kids. And so it was then I started showing pictures of Jillian and I, and then my wife, and then she also came and coached Girls on the Run with me. And so that was a good opportunity for them to see and for us. And they knew who she was, but it was interesting because it wasn't talked about. But now in my new school, knowing that I have other LGBTQ families in the community, it helps so much. And I know that I am a touch point and I'm an ally for those kids. And when I show the picture of, here's my family with 2 moms, they always raise their hand and they say, I have 2 moms. Like, and I see kids look at them and like, and they feel empowered by it. And we talked about like, well, what do you call your parents? And we've had connections. I've connected with kids on that regard. So it comes up. We do this thing in our school where we put up family pictures, all in our gallery. And so you can see every family that's represented at our school. And that's really powerful, to see that. And so, and like I said, I show the picture of myself during training camp at the beginning of the year. And I don't like to talk about myself a lot, but I do take a moment to do that and to talk about what I'm bringing to the table as well as what the kids are bringing. So, yeah.
Yeah, and from what I heard from both of you so far, relationships. I mean, when we have people in our school systems who are so diverse, and I mean in every way, sense of the word, that way we can reach all of the children. And that's the huge part. Now you're saying, hey, people know, come talk to me because I am representative of this. And now we have a safe place, like you were saying, that we could talk to. Fantastic. Steph Sandino. So would you like to tell us a little bit about, does this come up in your classroom and how do you address it?
This is actually one of the first year that it's came up in my 4 years of teaching. Kind of a newbie, as I would call myself, somewhat, with a little bit of season here and there. I have recently found out that there is a family that is part of the LGBTQ community, and this particular situation has been quite difficult because the student has been having a lot of tough times where bullying is occurring. Students are making fun at the fact that, he has two parents, part of this community. And it's tough because, being in this district, this is my first year. I haven't even spent, 6 months in this district. I don't know where the elementary school system or the elementary schools are coming from. I'm not sure what they're teaching. And I don't know if diversity is being taught. I don't know where these kids are coming from from that standpoint. So it's really tough to hear that all of this is happening. And, sometimes it happens. Kids go through elementary school, K through 6, and they don't hear a word about this. They don't hear a word about diverse families. They don't hear a word about how every family is different, whether their parents are male, female, male, male, female, female. Sometimes it's the first time that they're experiencing this and they don't know how to react. So that's where sometimes this all stems from. So I've kind of, have a biased view and taken to the student and kind of seen the situation and analyze the situation with this sort of biased lens. So I kind of have to address it. Like when I hear words like faggot and gay, being thrown out of my classroom, I try to address it the best way I can. And that's through, we're all different. We're not the same. We come from different places. Our skin is different. Our thoughts are different. Everything is different. So we kind of have to, I come from a place of acceptance and making sure that I have a classroom where everybody feels safe, and I create that environment. That way, when things like this happen, we are comfortable enough to address them. And I can, say to a kid, hey, you know what? Maybe you're not you don't understand what this student is feeling like, or what his home life is, or her home life is. So we kind of have to take a step back and put ourselves in their shoes. And it's kind of difficult at the middle school level just because sometimes their brain connections aren't all there. They're not developed. So they kind of struggle with it. So sometimes it's very impulsive. They say things that, sometimes they don't mean it. It just comes out of their mouths. So I try and be as accepting and as safe and as welcoming, and make sure that comes through my environment and my teaching and my lessons. That way I can create this somewhat safe bubble, and I can kind of make them stop and realize, whoa, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I don't know what's going on at home. Maybe, they had a really tough day, or, maybe they've been through this for a long time. So I try and approach it that way, the best way I can, without trying to step on anybody's toes. I know everybody's brought up differently, so I try and keep that into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. And Steph, you talked about the elementary level. Stephanie Roth did. In my class, we talk about families. Right there, it slides perfectly in to bring in, well, what is a family? Then you talk about a nuclear family. Well, what's the nuclear family? Then you talk about, well, what about families with two moms or two dads? And it's a real natural way to bring things in. Jayla, I don't know if you know where Lambertville is, but that's where I cut my teeth teaching. That's a high community of LGBTQ representatives there. So when I was there, completely comfortable going over this, when I got my second job, I didn't even think twice because I didn't have any pushback from the first one, and everything worked out well. My school's pretty supportive, and the standards, like Judy said, in New Jersey are pretty good about covering multiple things and giving us the leeway to talk about this. All right. So the final question I have for you is, what advice or what would you tell teachers out there, whether they are part of the community or not? What do their students need to know and understand from them? What do they need to do to create this, like you said, safe bubble where if something's said, they can address it, or when, if they want to bring it up and say, hey, this is something we should talk about. So let's start with J-Lo. Final thoughts. What can they do?
So I think both Stephanies would say that you have to create a class culture of respect and make sure that when you're teaching, you agree on rules as a class to respect each other and to be able to listen and to absorb another person's thoughts and have an environment where you can talk freely without being bullied or ridiculed or insulted. I think that we have a responsibility as a school community to make sure that we understand that the hallways are a place that's an extension of the classroom. And when we hear the word faggot in the hallway, it's not okay. And I see plenty of adults every day walking past kids in the hallway and hearing the word faggot and not doing anything. So I think that having upstanders in our schools and being able to promote upstanders as opposed to bystanders is a very important thing. I think that gay teachers, LGBT teachers have an extra responsibility to be able to make their kids feel emotionally and socially safe if they know that they're going through this type of thing, because we as teachers went through it ourselves and we have the empathy there. To an extent, I mean, if a child needs to speak to a counselor, we're teachers of health and physical education. There's only so far we can go, but being able to, I think going back to knowing the 360 on every one of your students and being able to meet them where they are and treat the student like a whole student, and being LGBT for a student, if that's how they identify, that's who they are, and you need to know that too.
Nice. Stephanie Roth?
Man, J-Lo. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think this is so important for both the LGBT community and all teachers, because we're teaching, we're in the business of kids, and we're gonna experience all different types of kids. And so I think I go back to the culture of empathy, and like exactly what J-Lo and Steph said, of like creating this safe environment from the day the kids walk into your bubble or your classroom. It's so important for me that they understand that we are going to use empathy throughout every single thing we do. And it's phys ed is such a performance, content area where kids are on stage and constantly performing their abilities to each other. And it can become really risky, and it can also perpetuate bullying, and it can perpetuate gender bullying, especially in the culture of sport and masculinity and what it means to be a boy and a male and a female in sport and all of that stuff. So I just think really thinking about empathy and creating those classroom, expectations, and never, always taking those opportunities when you hear those words being said, faggot, whatever it is. And I really like what you said, Steph, and creating like this, so they understand that it's a safe place for them to say how they feel, but also for them to meet them with some challenge and to think about where they're coming from, and also that there are lots of different types of people in the world. And so making sure that you're not perpetuating that sort of bullying type of atmosphere, and talking about it. I think silence is the worst enemy of all this. I think people are afraid to say the words gay, lesbian, transgender. And I think just talking about the family structure is a really good place to start, like you said, Justin. And that was my first intentional justice act that I've done since I started. And now I need to go to the next step, I know. But just thinking about always bringing voice. And like you said, as a part of the community, I have an extra responsibility to model that, and also be proud of who I am. And I'm lucky enough to be in a place that I can be my authentic self at work. And I feel so much for the people who can't be completely out. And I know that there are so many people out there who can. And I just want to let you know that I feel for you. And, and I hope that you can find your authentic voice with whatever you can within your school constraints. Hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Steph Sandino, what is going on over there?
I think my main thing would just be differences. I always think about this one children's book I always see when I go into Target. It's with the crayons at the, very cover of it, and talks about differences and how everybody has a different part no matter what color you are. So, I mean, the main thing that I would say for any teacher that's trying to bring this or have a light into this in their classroom is just teaching about differences and how people are in all walks of life, and people are going to encounter everyone in all walks of life. And, we're all different. We all come in different shapes and sizes. We all have, different religions. We all have different beliefs. We have different identities. So the more we can teach to differences, the more accepting hopefully we'll become. So making sure that students know that they're going to be encountering all of these differences in the people that they meet in their lives, I think the better off we'll be. And that also goes hand in hand with acceptance. We might not have the same values or beliefs, but at least have that respect for that person. Again, I think it boils down for me with the word differences and knowing how important that is. So short and sweet, but hopefully to the point.
Absolutely. So a couple things. First, as a former dummy who would say these words to my friends, and it was literally a term of endearment. Like, we would say to each other, like, hey, dummy, hey, idiot. Like, that's how we would use that word. It wasn't like a put down or anything. It was like what I would say to my best friends who I saw every day. And if a teacher had come over and said, hey, do you realize that if there is someone who's part of the LGBTQ community, how would this make them feel? And just had a quick 30-second conversation, I never would have said that again. Because, again, most people aren't hateful. They're not going to be out there. They're not trying to hurt others. And in the closing thoughts, after this election, as educators, it's time to stop talking. We now have to go to level 2, like Stephanie Roth was talking about. It's time to start doing. We need to be explicit with our teaching. If we hear it, we need to say something. If it's not being brought up in class, we have to bring it up in class in some way, shape, or form. We can no longer sit back and say, well, I didn't hear anything. It never was mentioned in class. Everything's good. The responsibility is no longer mine to talk about diversity, to talk about inclusion, to talk about acceptance. It's there, and it's more important now than ever. So, again, on Twitter and Facebook, we see a lot of allies that are, saying things, putting articles out there and talking the talk, which is fantastic. We definitely need that. But now it's time to start walking the walk. So if you are listening to this or watching it, I want you to ask yourself, what are you doing? What are you doing in your classroom specifically? If you're an administrator, what are you doing in your building to bring this to light? To talk about this, to have your students have honest discussions in a meaningful way. Because if we are not bringing this up in our classrooms explicitly, then we're basically just saying, oh, if no one brings up, it's not important enough to talk about. And nowadays, as educators, I don't think that's good enough. So I really hope that this will change at least one person's attitude into what they're teaching and how they're teaching it. And if that happens, then this was the greatest 45 minutes I've spent in my lifetime. So I would like to thank Stephanie Sandino, Stephanie Roth, and the great J-Lo. It was fantastic. Thank you, ladies, for taking the time and putting this together. And I'd like to thank Jorge, who's going to put it all together and put it out there on the box. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.